Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Yes, my friends, conservative, not bitter indeed. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for tuning in. You know, I wasn't originally planning to do this yesterday. I do want to return to our series that we've been doing that gives people a framework to help navigate politics and have meaningful conversations that actually can cause the person you're speaking with to pause and at least think, not to be emotionally driven and so forth. But that's what we've been spending some time doing. I thought we could return to that today, but I think I didn't get as far into the situation with Iran that I wanted to get. There's some other things that I want to get to. And if you missed the conversation yesterday, the best way to get this, the best way to get access to everything that we do, which includes the show, the Toddcast, if you will, it also includes background information, additional analysis that I don't have time to get to on this program. The best way to do that is to sign up for the Inner Circle. It is free. Text the word truth to 317-785-1030. So I want to continue where we picked up on that, or I should say where we left off with that yesterday. We talked about sanctions. We talked about Trump's 15-point plan. We talked about the Iranians' 5-point plan. And we talked about what sanctions are in place that Iran wants to be removed immediately, and part of what's being negotiated here as we hopefully move toward an end of this war. So that's where we are headed, my friends. Thank you for joining us. By the way, if you're tired of spending your hard-earned money at businesses that turn around and support leftist causes, which is maddening, by the way. You go to a big-name retailer, you just buy what? You buy something to put in the cabinet at home, the cabinets at home for the kids, or you buy something for home improvement purposes or whatever, and you realize that they're big donors to George Soros's foundations or the Democrat Party or MoveOn.org or whatever, right? The trans agenda, the LGBT, whatever. If you're tired of that happening, check out Freedom Marketplace. That's why we created it, to give you an alternative where you can buy from businesses that are not funding the stuff that you are diametrically opposed to. It is free for you to use. Businesses pay for a listing on the site. It is free for you. These businesses, by the way, have made a promise, a vow, a pledge not to support leftist candidates or causes. And if they do not hold that promise, keep that promise, they're going to be kicked out of the directory, my friends. So these are just good patriotic businesses that are pushing in the same direction you are. Check it out today. freedommarketplace.net. That's freedommarketplace.net. Liberty and business for all, my friends. Okay, so let's pick up where we left off yesterday. So if part of understanding Iran is understanding the JCPOA. Now, this was the Iran deal that was signed by the Obama administration. There was no Senate approval of this. It was not considered a treaty. It was just signed by the Obama team. Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. So this was the prior agreement that was supposed to, well, here's what it was supposed to do. Limit uranium enrichment by the Iranians, reduce their nuclear stockpile, that allowed inspections, and then there would be some sanctions relief in exchange for those things. But it went wrong, my friends. It went wrong. And where did it go wrong? Well, there's disputes over compliance. Disputes over compliance as though it's some sort of a vague and general term, and dispute over whether or not they were technically compliant. So early on in the deal, it's at least argued, some people argue that Iran stayed within the letter of the law, so to speak, but it tiptoed up to the limit. In fact, reminds me, we had years ago, we have 3 kids, by the way, 16, 14, and 12. When our youngest, our 12-year-old, she's always been one to test the limits. And I remember we took a family trip. In fact, I'm trying to think, it probably was right after 2020. After the whole COVID debacle, we went to Disney with my wife's family. And we were waiting on one of the buses, and there's a line. There's a line there that basically says, stay behind this until the bus comes to a complete stop. So you're not, obviously going to get out in front of the bus and have an accident happen. And she asked about it. She must have been about 6 at the time, I'm guessing. And we saw her literally put her feet down. You probably had kids that do the same thing. And she scooted her feet, and she got right up to the edge of the line as she waited on that bus. And then I think she kind of looked at her mom like, following the letter of the law, Mom, but I'm right here on the edge. I don't have room to go a millimeter more. I'm not going to, but you're not sure if I am or if I'm not. And that's basically what Iran had done. And that, of course, built distrust. So it began to beg the question, are they complying and they're just right up to the edge, or are they trying to game the system? And it got worse than that, my friends. I mean, they've interfered with inspectors getting into places and all sorts of things. So it really went off the rails. And of course, none of this was surprising. I remember talking about this. I started this podcast in 2015. So I remember talking about this because I remember there was a phrase I used to use because I saw the same exact thing happening in the Iran nuke deal that happened with Clinton's deal with the North Koreans, with his North Korean nuke deal. And I used to talk about how the left is enamored by words and language, and they if you sign a piece of paper and you make a pinky promise, the left is ecstatic. They think that that's some great accomplishment. And I'm over here thinking that may be a great accomplishment if, right? There's this little word, if. It's conditional. Depends on what happens from this point. And if you're not willing to enforce it, then you've got yourselves, my friends, a pretty big problem. And that's kind of what we had in a nutshell. So there were sunset clauses in the JCPOA, the Iran nuke deal, and some key restrictions were temporary, and some of those limits expired somewhere in the range of 8 to 15 years. And so this provided a pathway for Iran to legally expand their program later. This was one of the big problems that I saw, that critics saw of this plan, was that at the end of the whole process, Iran was going to either have or be on the doorstep of having nuclear weapons. So what were we really trying to accomplish here? What were we doing? The missile program was not included. It included nuclear limits only. and their missile development continued, which, of course, again, the average leftist, I listen to the average leftist talk about guns, just guns. We're not even to the level of nuclear warheads and so forth. But they talk about guns and they have no idea. They have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. It's remarkable that they really think, for example, there's a firearm called the AR-15, you know this, and a lot of them really believe that stands for assault rifle. It's not what it stands for, but that's what it is. In fact, if you ask them what is an assault rifle, they'll basically tell you what is an automatic machine gun, not realizing that AR-15s are semi-automatic. It doesn't matter. They have no idea. They have no idea. They've never fired one. They may not have seen one outside of something on television or a movie or something like that. I don't know. They have no idea what they're talking about. And these are the same people who negotiated or who are part of administration who negotiated the end of that negotiated a nuclear deal with Iran. And missiles are the delivery system for nuclear warheads. It's not enough. These things go hand in hand, right? You have to have the ability to enrich the uranium, make it weapons grade, develop nuclear warheads, and then you have to have systems by which you can deliver the warheads. If you've got the warhead, but you don't have a missile that can travel far enough to take it to a place that you really want to nuke, you got a problem, right? I mean, unless you're going to do the Enola Gay thing like we did when we dropped an atomic bomb, 2 atomic bombs on the Japanese, unless there's going to be something like that, which again, it's not really a practical way of delivering these warheads anymore. You're just running into problems if you don't have missile capabilities. That's why, by the way, if you look at the race to space that the United States and the Soviet Union had back in the 50s and 60s and all that was happening there, a lot of this was, a lot of the importance of that race was built around having what's called ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, which would actually leave the atmosphere, go around the Earth, if you will, re-enter the atmosphere, drop the warhead over the target, and it would detonate above its target to maximize casualties and so forth, take out key infrastructure, defenses, whatever. But the missile program was not included in the original JCPOA, the original Iran nuclear deal. And so that was another problem. There were inspection limitations. Access existed, but it was not always immediate. Sometimes the Iranians interfered with this. Some sites were simply harder to inspect. It was a game, right? It was kind of a game of hiding. When we used to play games and I was a kid with my mom where we would hide an item in the house. We used to hide, when I was little, I was born in the late 70s, so bear in mind this was back before the internet, really video games. It was television, or it was outside is what it was. It was riding your bike, swimming in the pool, playing in the yard, playing toy guns in the woods or whatever. That's the kind of stuff we did. But when we were pretty small, we played this game where we would hide the thimble. That's what we did. And she would hide it, or we would hide it from her in different places around the house. And it was like a hide and go seek game for an item. That's how these inspections became for the Iranians, or at least there was a lot of suspicion that was what was going on. And understandably so, because we understood what they really wanted, which was nuclear capabilities. They never addressed their broader behavior when it came to causing problems in the region. They still continued working with proxies like Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis. If you don't know what a proxy is, it's basically, it's kind of plausible deniability. So instead of someone with an Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps military outfit going and conducting an operation, they would fund and they would arm these terrorist organizations, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and there's others as well. And they would basically pay them to go, in many cases, to try to kill American soldiers. Iran killed a lot of American soldiers in Iraq, and I believe in Afghanistan too, but I definitely know Iraq, especially when it came to IEDs, improvised explosive devices. A lot of those are believed to come from their proxies and so forth. They just continued doing it. They continued working through these proxies. This is not some group of choir members or Boy Scouts. These are people who are hell-bent on causing death and destruction to people who do not submit to their worldview, their religion, their ideology. So, Iran received in the JCPOA economic benefits early in the process. So the sanctions relief came up front. They took advantage of that. This allowed us, on the other side of the equation, to lose leverage, of course, doing that. So that was a problem. We already talked a little bit about Iran not always making it easy, not always complying with the letter of the law when it came to inspections. And then, of course, in Trump's first term, we withdrew from the Iran nuke deal. That was in 2018, so the thing was about 3 years old. Trump says, look, this thing is too weak. It's temporary. Even if we follow this thing to its completion, it's going to end up precisely where we don't want it to end up, which is Iran either with or on the doorstep of having nuclear weapons. This is simply an untenable position. These people are the Ayatollahs, the supreme leader. These people are madmen, chanting death to Israel, death to America, fighting us through proxy war. This is not acceptable. This is not going to continue. We're not going to do this. And so we withdrew. We withdrew from the deal. By the way, I mentioned the JCPOA, the Iran nuke deal, was not presented as a treaty to Congress. So since there was no congressional approval, since it was just an agreement made by the previous administration, the next administration could simply just declare it null and void. And that's exactly what happened. So then after we withdrew, Iran increased its enrichment levels. They expanded their stockpile. They had the development of advanced centrifuges, which of course are necessary in the development, I'd say of nuclear material, but the enrichment of uranium to use for ultimately weapons grade uranium. Nuclear warheads are the direction that's moving in. And so everything just completely collapsed. And so that's why we found ourselves in this, of course, position. We had 4 years of Biden running the show, which, of course, nothing was going to happen. It was a mess. And so Trump comes in his second term. He drops, they bomb these nuclear sites in the summer of 2025, last year, about 9 months ago. And now, of course, we know what happened here recently when we took out their leadership. It wasn't just, we had taken out Soleimani originally, but now this time, because again, they kept moving, they just kept moving towards it. And it is a death cult. The leadership is there. They are barbarians and brutal and wicked and evil, and they've told us their intentions. They've made no bones about it. And so we decided to step in before it was too late. And that's basically what happened there. So, going back to my notes here to see what else I wanted to. That's a good place to begin to unwind and stop here. But there's other things I want to get to. There's certainly other things that I want to get to here. And I want to maybe look even at a broader picture between the history, the longer history of failed agreements between this country and Iran. And that's just, again, the JCPOA was just one of those. So we're in a bad position as it stands. Neither side trusts the other. I think we're completely justified in not trusting them. And so now where do you go from here? So we all want to get to peace, but in order to have peace, you have to have the ability to enforce peace. You can't just hope that your adversary is going to wake up one day and not want to obliterate you or wipe you from the face of the planet. In fact, in yesterday's newsletter, yesterday's Inner Circle, we always have quotes in there from, quotes, of course, from yours truly, but a quote of the day from oftentimes founding fathers, early presidents, that kind of thing. George Washington was in yesterday's Inner Circle. He said this: the best way to preserve peace is to be prepared for war. And that is exactly spot on accurate. That's the only way to have peace, is if you're able to defend yourself from your enemies and they have a healthy fear of who you are and what you can do. So that, my friends, is where we're going to pause here and take a quick time out. You've worked hard, you've made smart choices, and now it's about making sure that effort counts, not just today, but for the future. Full Suite Wealth helps forward-thinking people with a coordinated approach to wealth, legacy, and legal planning. That includes private equity, private credit, and options strategies. Full Suite Wealth will help you see the big picture, they'll help you plan ahead, and they'll help make your success truly matter for the people you care about most. The goal is to give you a plan that stands the test of time. Visit fullsuitewealth.com. That's fullsuitewealth.com. Build your legacy, secure your future, my friends. Quick time out here. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Going through a lot, I know. Enjoy doing it. I mean, this is necessary to understand. How many times, by the way, do you hear this sort of thing, this level of explanation, this level of thought being provided by people on the left? They reduce everything to a slogan. Now, I get the beauty of marketing that, but conservatism requires thinking. And thinking properly requires a dialogue, a conversation, explanation. It doesn't often reduce, or if it does, it still requires an explanation. It doesn't always reduce to a nice, neat little slogan, but see, feelings do. And that's what the left has. The left has feelings. That's what they want. That's what their entire worldview is based upon. Ooh, I don't like that. Let's make a law against it. Oh, I really like that. Let's fund it with the federal government, right? Let's take from people who have what we believe is too much and give it to the people that want to do this thing that we think is good. That's how the left wants to use government, my friends. And it's despicable, if you ask me. Now, I know on one hand, it sounds like, oh, they're just trying to help people, but you don't help people with other people's money, other people's liberty. And they certainly don't help contribute to the conversation on these issues because they don't add to it. That's why they want to constantly repeat talking points. They want to repeat the talking points so that it just is kind of a repetitive thing. It's like a drip, drip, drip marketing campaign instead of an actual, it's not like the Lincoln Douglas debates that went on for hours. These are just talking points they want to repeat. But we're going through this and we're explaining this to give context and information and to help people understand what's really going on here. There's been a long history of failures between the United States and Iranian governments as it pertains to agreements, right? We talked about the JCPOA, that's the Iran nuclear deal that Obama put into place in 2015. And there's been cycles, right? Sanctions and then retaliation. Sanctions, retaliation. There's not been direct war until now because proxy wars were the way that the Iranian regime wanted to go because they understand you can't take on the United States of America directly today and expect to walk away unscathed and unharmed. So, the United States has, because of the politicians that we've had in office, former presidents, not this one I exclude from this, but in the United States, there was a political incentive to our politicians, of course, to look strong without war. And when the enemy knows that you're not prepared to back up the sanctions to really do what's necessary for enforcement, they will push the envelope. They will push the envelope. And so Iran's incentives, we talked about incentives when we talked about having a political framework through which to view things that are happening so that we can have an understanding and a way of communicating them. But incentives matter. And so presidents, they want to look strong for the optics, but they don't want to go to war. Iran is trying to survive economically, so they have an incentive to figure out how to deal with all the sanctions and difficulties that have been placed upon them for not playing nice in the international community, while at the same time, they don't want to give up complete leverage in these negotiations and effectively negotiate a deal that ends with them not having anything that they want. And so both the Iranians or both the Iranian leadership and American leadership, the negotiations are viewed, especially this is politics, right? Especially here in the United States, historically. Again, I don't put Trump in this category, but both of them are negotiating for the purposes, of course, what we've already mentioned, but also with the domestic audience in mind. And so it's complicated, but it's also, in another way, it's simple to understand, but it's also, it leads to complexities because there's a lot of forks in that road as you start to think through what happens when I'm trying to do something that's in our best interest, but I want to avoid this conflict, and they're trying to survive economically, so they want to push the envelope without pushing it too far, all these things, right? So accountability should be a key mechanism in this, but accountability often fails because neither side can agree who to trust as a neutral body. But I would say even beyond that, the United States, I think, has been weak at times with this, of course, with the JCPOA. But we've allowed ourselves to be subjected to some real nonsensical gibberish and some shenanigans here. And it makes just the things that we were expected to believe and just to ignore. It's a lot, right? It's a lot. Of course, they want nuclear weapons. They're not just trying to be benevolent to their people. That's not why they're trying to create a greater ability to enrich uranium and so forth. And so the other thing is these agreements, they can radically change. They can radically change depending upon who's in the White House at any given time. Now there's a new leader. Well, we'll see who actually ends up there, but new leadership in Iran as well. How does that impact this? That's one of the reasons why, listen, I know politically it wasn't expedient or it wouldn't have turned out the way Obama wanted it, but that's when it doesn't go through the Senate, these treaties, it's subjected to these kind of radical changes. So there's that. And then, of course, the whole concept of, can we truly verify what they're doing? Is there really a way to say that they're complying? Are they playing a game with us? That's always there, especially, these folks are masters of deception. And on top of that, as though we needed more to fuel this problem, you've got the role of the media and institutions. You've got reporting that sometimes wasn't comprehensive. They didn't give proper context. Of course, the media is effectively the PR firm of the Democrat Party. So when Obama is in office or he does something, they protect it at all costs. When Trump is in office and does something, they try to tear it apart and misrepresent it and try to make it look as negative as possible. And so you got all these factors. And of course, the people who are inside government, they don't want to admit where there's at least, again, I'm not talking about Trump now. Trump is not in that category. But this is just the nature of humanity, of people. You don't want to create problems for yourself. You don't want negative polls, all that stuff. Then you got headlines that come out that, they're, even if they're not deceptive, they're short. And so when you have a short attention span, coupled with incomplete information, coupled with the desire to, mislead the American people, at least to make it look as beneficial for your side as possible. It's just a perfect recipe for confusion, misunderstanding. Then, of course, we had a lot of negotiations that were political gamesmanship. I do think that stuff comes to they're on a much shorter leash with Trump in the White House than they would be without him. But these are the factors that all pile on here and make this even more complicated. And there's an attitude of distrust for good reason. We have great reasons to distrust them, my friends, for certain. Anyway, I've got to take a time out here. Friends, there's a lot of confusion out there about kratom, and you've probably read the headlines. Most of those headlines are based on synthetic junk that isn't real kratom at all. Real kratom is natural. It's tested. It's handled with care, and that's what you get from Christopher's Organic Botanicals. They are a family-run company. They partner directly with farmers in Indonesia. They lab test every batch. No chemicals, no fillers, no shortcuts. This is a trusted herbal option that's been used for generations, and it's a real alternative for people looking for something that doesn't come with a warning label that's a mile long. Start with their Kratom Starter Pack once you've done your research and want to try it. And when you do, you use coupon code Todd Huff. You'll save 10% off your first order. Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Truth, tradition, transparency, my friends. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Third and final segment. We've been talking about Iran and this supposed negotiation to the end of this war. We've been talking about it for 2 episodes now. And by the way, the best way to get everything that we've talked about, including the links, the background information, if you want to forward this on to other people, if you want to have access to the stuff that, not just in audio form, but in written form that you can read and get the links to and get some additional background information on, that's fantastic. You just text the word truth to 317-785-1030. and boom, you'll get it through the inner circle. It's totally free, by the way. So, all right, my friends, you know that one of the biggest challenges that we as conservatives have is finding ways to ensure our values align with the way that we live our lives. You don't want to do something, you don't want to spend your money, use your money, your resources in such a way that it's actually fueling the things that you fight vehemently against every day. And so that includes how we invest our money. I love what the team at 48 Financial is doing. They specialize in biblically responsible investing. They screen out companies that do not align with your faith, your values, so that you're not funding things that go completely against what you believe in. They do the heavy lifting for you. All you have to do is take a quick and easy assessment to tell them where your investments are, and they will tell you to what degree those investments align with your values. You can complete that quick and easy assessment at 48financial.com/Todd. That's 48financial.com/Todd. They're here to worry about your money, my friends, so you don't have to. All right, so just going to wrap this up. We've been talking about just the complexities here and how negotiations often start to fall apart immediately, intentionally. It's becoming a complicated thing, right? We're dealing with a country that, we don't trust. It's built upon a worldview. Their system is built upon a worldview that does not respect the freedoms and choices of individual Americans, or people, I should say, individual people. And there's just a difference in culture and understanding, and there's evil in this too. Make no mistake, the Ayatollahs are evil people. And I'm not here to say the United States is perfect, that our presidents have been perfect. That's not the point. But they are operating inside a regime that is full of darkness. So there's distrust. And they make it clear that they don't have any interest in coexisting with people who have a different worldview than they do. And so here we are. So that's what's made this so complicated, so difficult. And I don't know. I do know this. Closing thoughts on this. I do know that in order to have some sort of a framework, you have to be willing to enforce it. And that's why we're in a good position right now, because Trump is not afraid to enforce it. And the Iranians know this. It's interesting to me listening to people talk about how we're a laughing stock on the international stage. Trump has caused the United States to be a joke. In what sense? Because I tell you this, and this is true, even if you hate Trump in the deepest recesses of your mind, that this is true. You know that these regimes who are hell-bent on doing evil and creating problems around the world or in certain regions of the world, that if Trump tells them to knock it off or there will be consequences, or if, take another president from the past, Biden, Obama, Clinton, Bush, certainly some of them would have a point that they would retaliate or respond. But I think there's no doubt about it. They have a healthy fear, and that's the right word, fear. The Bible tells us that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And it's really, it doesn't mean a trembling fear where you're afraid to approach Yahweh. He wants to draw us near, but we need to have a healthy respect of him. Look, we need to understand that we're not calling the shots in that relationship, right? As he told Job, where were you, Job, when I created the heavens and the earth? Did I consult with you about these things? Or did I just kind of put them together and, let you be a part of this? Because that's the truth. And when you think about how you want your leaders to respond, at least how I want them to respond or be viewed on the international stage, is for people to have a healthy respect. I don't want them shivering in their boots. I tell you what, if you want to confront us, if you want to challenge us, I want them to be shaking in their boots. And so I don't know where this is going to end up. I do hope that we're moving towards peace, but peace for the sake of peace that doesn't really address the problems is a fool's game, as we found out. But I've got to wrap it up. Folks, have a great weekend. Thanks for listening. SDG.